Welcome, welcome, welcome back. Dr. Jason Dean, Brave TV, your source for health, freedom, and knowledge. And he has stories today. He has stories. The best way to learn is with stories. Mondays with Morley, right? So it's funny when you texted me that earlier. I grew up, I always tell this because I've gone to many types of churches over the many, many years, and churches would, and I shouldn't say this, but they bore me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to listen to droning on and on and on and on. Like, I'm better off on myself. So, but I tell a story of growing up, and we had a little community church, which is still there to this day. My family goes to it. I go to it and I go back because the pastor, he's since passed. He like baptized me, a whole bunch of stuff, like really great guy. Took care of the whole family. He would talk for 20 to 30 minutes every Sunday, but he would talk with applying scripture and principles to stories.
Yeah.
So much better. It was 20 to 30 minutes of just really good everyday stories and how you could apply spirituality and, God to your life, like to life, right? Like being kind to others. And like people say all the time, like my pastor's untouchable. Like he's long since gone, but I'm like, he could really turn anything, any given day, meeting somebody, talking to somebody, seeing an old friend, a car breaking down, a printer, and he would turn it into something where you'd like feel good about it, right?
A printer? Did you have to bring up the printer?
The printer. Morley has had printer problems the last couple of days.
Oh my God.
He's dejected over it too.
It's like, when does life, when do we get to go downhill, right?
I ask that every day. When do we get to go downhill for a couple of years so I can just, I don't want to sit on a couch, but can I just take a moment off?
I just want, a little break. I mean, so we're coming back from we spent a lot of money on our cars the last couple of weeks. And, but, Liz drives a 206 and I drive a 201. And we're just too stubborn to, give them up. In some part, they can't zap them from the air because they don't have the electronics in them.
Right.
So, not that anyone would ever think to do that, but we're coming back from our chiropractor this morning. You're doing along 40, going 80 miles an hour, and I look down, and the temperature gauge is like it's like a swing going. From midpoint to hot, and then it would
That's never good.
Come back. So I called up the mechanic as we're driving. I said, "Dude, what is this?" He goes, "Maybe you ought to stop by like now."
Before you blow it.
Yeah, turns out it's really funny. In retrospect, it was funny. It's got kind of one of those drives to the
right.
Mechanic.
Your white knuckle drive to get there before it blows.
Right. Absolutely, and it was a hose clamp had become loose.
So water was kicking out.
Yeah, and air was getting into the system. I had no idea how pressure sensitive. I mean, I'm not a Luddite. I've been around cars, but it was like there was a tiny little space where the air could get in, and it was just
throws the whole thing off. Yep,
it really does. It was amazing. So as I'm sitting there and he's fixing the car, I'm thinking about not everyone who's listening to this conversation is a gearhead. Not everyone has worked in a gas station or an auto shop. I did sophomore year. It was fascinating. I really had an interesting experience working with a guy named Otis. He was like a 70-year-old mechanic, chain smoker, and he drank hot coffee in the summer and iced coffee in the winter. Very interesting guy.
He did the opposite.
It's the opposite, right? But he swore it worked for him.
Yeah.
And I really learned. I didn't master it, but I learned what patience is all about. And he would be tinkering on a car and he couldn't figure it out. He'd go smoke a cigarette, have a cup of coffee.
Think about it. Let the nicotine stimulate the mind.
Yeah, it's amazing.
A little bit of caffeine to kick in.
Yeah, his batting average was 1,000. He never had a problem he couldn't solve, but sometimes it took longer than others. But you begin to learn about different parts of the car. Well, everybody knows the battery, right? That's where the source of the when you got to start up the engine, you got to have good battery charge. Well, that's our liver. Our liver is a battery. It's a big giant blob of fat, and I get such a kick out of fatty liver disease. It's a fatty organ. What are you calling it? A fatty liver? But in any event, there's another there's another piece of the engine called an alternator.
That's
And
correct.
what the alternator does is it recharges the battery. Like, okay, it's a really important part of the car. And Dr. Liz's alternator went bad, so we had to replace it
Okay.
because the battery warning light went on. I'm like, gee, that's not good.
Is
This
it a
was a couple of
battery?
weeks ago.
That's always the question too. Is it a battery or is it the alternator?
Was it the alternator? Turns out it was. It would have been nice if it was battery.
That's
That's easy.
That's easy.
Cheapy, yeah. No, it had to be the alternator just to make it more exciting. So then, so Liz's car is called Ellie, and you load it on the left. Ellie, get it? Ellie on the left. And my car is a Beamer, BMW X5. Bring my wallet is what BMW means. Bring my wallet.
Yeah, there. Even if you get a good deal on the car, the service is gonna get you.
Oh man, oh, ouch. And so my car is called Buster, and there's an R in Buster, and you load the gas on the right side. Ellie's on the left, Buster's on the right. You got that?
I
You
got it.
with me? Okay. So Liz's car was in the shop, and I thought, no worries, I'll just drive Buster up to Starbucks so I can do my reading. This is like 2 weeks ago. And I get up to the Starbucks, and I'm sitting in the parking lot waiting a couple minutes for them to open up, and the car dies. I thought, oh, it's just a quirky thing, and I turned over the
Done.
the fuel pump
Oh,
died.
my wife just had that one of those replaced in her Highlander.
Well, they're a lot more expensive than a BMW. I
Yes,
can
they are.
guarantee you that.
Highlander wasn't that pricey.
Yeah. So, yeah, if any of the people out there listening, want to spend a lot of money, buy a BMW used. It's a great way to burn through your cash. But what I came to realize this morning as I was reflecting on these little car repairs is over the last few weeks, it's like the treasure trove has opened up about what's really going on with copper. And again, we live in this very simplistic world where you're anemic and you're copper toxic. And we're supposed to believe we need more iron
Yep.
and we got to get
I
rid
hear
of it.
I hear copper toxicity all the time.
All the time, right? Absolutely. Yeah. And people are terrified. Oh, take copper. Oh, I think, and they're really scared. And so I'm reading these articles just from the last few years, like 2019 to 2024. So 5 year span. But they're really figuring out the metabolism, the movement, the handoffs, the transport of copper from the time it enters your mouth to the time it leaves your body. And it's really amazing what they've been able to figure out. Excuse me. But what's come to light is we have a very narrow understanding of where copper is in our body. Most people think it's in the hair, or they think it might be in the blood, and that's about it. And it's like, well, it's a tad bit more complicated than that because all the mitochondria in our body require copper in the center of the mitochondria. So there's 40 quadrillion. Well, we can't relate to that. That's a big number. It's 15 zeros. But it's like it's all over the body. And the the center of the mitochondria is where copper gets stored and distributed. I just read that a couple days ago. Well, I've never read that, Jason. Stored and distributed from the mitochondria. Well, that's a really big deal because it's like, that sure sounds like a fuel pump to me, and
Oh,
a gas tank as well.
nice,
We're storing,
nice
right?
connection.
Yeah, and so then I'm reading about there's a Chinese laundry in the cell where proteins get folded, and no ticky, no washi, right? And so um, the that organelle is called the trans Golgi network,
I know of that one.
named named for Dr. Golgi. I think he named it like in the 1920s or something. And it's another center for copper. Copper is really involved in the, the process of folding proteins is maturing the protein. It gets more refined, it gets more powerful, has more energy, and that takes copper. And so we've got the mitochondria and this trans Golgi network. And then there's actually a third center, and there's something called a lysosome. It's the stomach of the cell,
Okay.
and it's where things go. That's where autophagy. People have probably heard of that, where we're breaking down things, where we are recycling cell parts. And it turns out that the lysosome is considered a copper storage vehicle.
Hmm.
Not quite CVS, CSV. And so here we've got these three centers. Again, this is new in the last couple of weeks of my awareness that and and so the lysosome um, works in a low acid environment. It's
Okay.
like the stomach. It's like our stomach has low acid, where it's very acidic. Put it that way. It's a very acidic environment in our stomach, and it's a very acidic environment in the lysosome, which is the stomach of the cell. Really, really important. And what runs them are what are called high energy peroxides. So that means that, oh, well, how do we make those high energy peroxides? Oh, yeah, you got to have copper to do that. And here we have these three centers. And as I've been thinking about these centers and thinking about these broken cars, what I came to realize is, oh my gosh, the, the copper is like the battery of the car, the alternator of the car, the fuel pump, the gas tank, and it's never described that way in traditional um, or conventional um, literature.
Mm-hmm.
They're always breaking it apart. And when you begin to think of it in those automotive terms, it's also the spark plug. Let's not forget the spark plug. And the spark plug needs to respond to a signal. Well, that signaling is all over. I mean, copper's all over signaling, especially in the nerves. Oh my God! And so all of this, the parallel is pretty strong between the way a car works and the way our body works. But again, most people don't have that working knowledge. But it's absolutely amazing how dependent all these different facets of our automotive experience are. They've all got to be working right in order to be able to get from point A to point B. And this idea that copper is toxic it's absolutely laughable. And the, what's coming to light for me is that there are some very sophisticated mechanisms in the cell to keep track of copper and make sure that it's not building in any one center more than it should. And this idea that spilling out and causing free radicals is it's a very pedestrian idea. That's the center point of oncology. They blame cancer on what's called unbound copper,
Right.
and it's just I won't get into all of the detail right now, but that's not true. It's a popular story. It's a simple lie versus the complex truth, and we don't have enough time, and I don't think the followers or the listeners have enough stamina to listen to us yammer about why that distortion about cancer and copper is just not right. It's been they took a little thread of an idea and they've turned it into this Afghan, and it's not true. It's simply not true. So I think it's important for people to realize that there's a complete misunderstanding about copper. We've talked about that,
The
but the major mechanisms that are being affected. Yeah, go ahead.
the electron transport chain of the Krebs cycle does not operate without these high energy peroxides, and it gives off, because I've seen that, but that means copper is used and I think we've talked about it before. Every single step in the Krebs cycle, citric acid cycle, of ATP being built at the end or put out at the end is every single step requires copper.
I don't know if
For the
every
most part.
single. Yeah, I think copper.
It may
is
not be everything. It's majority of steps, I should say.
right. It's critical, and that's not taught, and
No.
it's not taught at all. And the Krebs cycle is just a priming mechanism for the electron transport chain, because
Yes.
you're making the reducing elements to really allow for the ETC to do its job, and it's not taught that way. And I don't know. I just think it's important for people to move beyond the narrative and know that there is more to the story. You don't need to become an auto mechanic. You just need to know that, wow, the body has certain nutrient requirements. And one of them is we got to have a regular supply of minerals in general, but we got to have magnesium and copper in particular. And boy, the engine of our body knows exactly what to do. And I just think there's so much confusion and misinformation, and I think it's sincere. I just don't think it's taught right. And there are a lot of people out there talking about what's called metabolic dysfunction,
Mm-hmm.
and no one's. I came across an article just on Sunday. It was yesterday. No, Saturday. It was Saturday, and this author said metabolic dysfunction is copper deficiency. Period. Like, wow, that's like really calling it like it is. I'd never seen it in writing before.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody use the word copper in the Krebs cycle other than you.
Well,
I mean, as many times I've been taught the Krebs cycle or gone over it, no one's ever mentioned copper.
well, the thing is, it's because they don't know it,
Sure.
and on top of that, they're not curious.
Right.
Yeah, it's just what's amazing to me is we would not be on this planet were it not for copper. I mean, it's absolutely it's central to our existence.
There is
Life does not exist on planet Earth without copper.
there is right there is copper going in, and as soon as the copper molecules go in, they're distributed, and mitochondria requires copper.
Well, it's um, yes,
It's just
and
that's just a simple diagram for people to see, obviously.
simple diagram, and just so the element in the center is the Chinese laundry,
Yep.
and the organelle off to the right is the mitochondria. It's called a powerhouse when in fact it's really a lighthouse.
Mm-hmm.
It's light energy is coming out of that organelle. The other part that's becoming increasingly discussed in the literature is that nucleus below the Chinese laundry,
It's the blue oval.
blue oval. You cannot transcribe a gene without copper.
Correct.
You can't store iron in the nucleus because iron gets in the nucleus, but you can't store it without copper. And there's a very important mechanism of replication that's carried out in the nucleus, and it's iron dependent, but it's got to be kept in proper redox. So the valence of iron matters. It's either +2 or +3, and guess who keeps it in the proper redox? It's copper. And again, these concepts are becoming more and more discussed in the literature, and at some point, I'm hoping that someone's going to step back and say, wait a minute. Maybe this copper thing is more important than we realize, because it's so central to our day-to-day existence, and people just aren't taught that.
It's a true story.
Yeah. So people need to challenge the narrative that that you're copper toxic. It's just like, well, can you prove that? Can you show me the articles? And there are articles that are going to speak to that, but they're not accurate. And that's the challenge, is beginning to bust apart that mythology. That is a full-time job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very fascinating. All because a couple cars broke down.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And well, when things like that happen with that kind of intensity, I'm thinking, there's a message here. I'm supposed to learn something from this experience, and besides spend a lot of money. Yeah.
Did you know, by the way, I'm sure you knew this, but did you know the car alternator contains copper?
Historically, yes, it does. Apparently, drug addicts figured that out, and they've been stealing alternators, and now they make it out of aluminum, is what I learned this morning.
Really?
Yeah. And what there's the guy who comes in to see our chiropractor, Craig French. He's a car enthusiast, and I was sharing this wisdom about the car, and this guy was fascinated. He was really intrigued by it. And he said, well, they actually make alternators with aluminum now. He said, but they're more prone to fires as a result. I said, why is that? He said, aluminum is more brittle than copper. He said, copper is a much better metal to work with, but it's a source of theft.
Maybe they're changing over. It's still showing that they're made of copper, but it's
maybe it's the cutting edge of aluminum.
It might be cutting edge. Well, it's interesting you bring that up. So, we had our air conditioner handler rebuilt in October.
Yep.
And never had a problem before, ever. They went in, they put a light in, because, like, whatever. Put the stupid UV light in. I could care less. Just put it in, because it's whatever. And a couple weeks ago, the air conditioner just shuts down. The whole thing shuts down. And I'm like, oh my God, like, you just rebuilt this thing. So they come over and he's like, oh, well, I know your problem. I'm like, what's that? He goes, it's the backup of the little drainage, whatever. I'm like, and I look at him, I'm like, guys, this is never, like, why did this now become an issue in air conditioners at the drainage pipe?
Right.
So he opens it up. He goes, well, you got algae in the bottom of your pan. And I go, why is there algae in the bottom of the pan? I'm just asking questions to the guy. Like, I'm trying not to be a jerk, but I'm like, why is there algae there? I mean, source of the problem. And he says, well, we used to use copper.
Oh.
Because it kills off bacteria and fungal and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And I said, why isn't there copper in there anymore? And he goes, well, expense.
Yeah, too expensive.
And I go, so now what are we using? I think he said aluminum. I go, and now you put aluminum in, and now the damn things break down all the time.
That's right.
I said, so you're going cheaper and they break down all the time. When something worked, and then he's like, and then he said, and then then this is my sarcasm kicking in. I wasn't being Jared, with sarcasm. He goes, well, the problem with the copper is people steal it. And I go, maybe if we educated people on drugs and rehab, they wouldn't end up stealing the copper in the first place. And I was like, obviously I was talking to the wrong person, but in my mind, I'm like, so we're gonna screw everybody on their air conditioners, their cars, their electric, their heating, their whatever, because we can't learn how to tell people not to do drugs in our world. Like, is that really where we're at now? So go ahead.
Think about MRSA in a hospital.
Right.
You know what stopped MRSA in a second?
Copper.
The buildings used to have brass everywhere, right?
Right.
Especially door handles. Especially
Right.
the plates were made of brass
Right.
for a reason.
So I said maybe if you put some copper in it, because see here's the deal. I live on a different road. No, like I live off the beaten path, kind of, and
Right.
my house is usually closed. So just put the copper in. Like, it won't be. So he actually said he put some copper in, and I'm like, oh my god, like it's more like, I mean, I know this is kind of, it's humorous in a way, but we have gone downhill. And one of the reasons, or one of the signs or triggers of going downhill many, many years ago, decades ago, is the removal of copper from our lives.
Yeah, no, again, I think I may have shared this with you privately, or maybe we talked about it last week. the copper mining company referring to copper as the eternal metal. I'd never read that before. And it's like, oh my gosh, because it's the only metal that can be 100% recycled. Only metal. The only metal. All the others apparently gradually just break down, or they can't be completely recycled. But copper can. And it's like, isn't it fascinating that, like you said, it's disappearing from our environment? And I don't think people realize, I mean, I know they don't realize how important it is to the body, but I think broadly speaking, our environment is losing this, especially the soil, right?
Yep.
And the food that we eat, missing that. And I don't know, are we the only one-eyed giants in the Valley of the Blind? Is that what's going on?
Isn't it astounding?
No, it's like, don't you feel kind of weird? Like, we can see it, but most people are just like, well, yeah, whatever, and go about their business.
Do you think I'm gonna play skeptic here?
Uh-oh.
They started putting iron in everything, right?
Yeah. Arn, pronounce it
Now,
right.
is there a possibility that they either were told something or they learned something that is there a reason that they were acting out of kindness, that they just made a mistake to put iron in, versus they're just trying to kill everybody?
No, I don't go there. Don't.
No, I know.
No.
That's why I'm asking. Was there a legitimate reason they believed iron was the way to go?
Here's what I think is the hierarchy of what happened. I think there's a misunderstanding about anemia,
Okay.
and there again, the gross misunderstanding is that they were studying anemia in pregnant women. You don't study pregnant women as a model for anemia, because hemoglobin goes down the second half of the pregnancy.
Why would you study a pregnant person for anything other than just
Right.
pregnancies? You want a base person who has nothing going on in their body.
You're right. You're barking up the right tree. Yes, that's exactly. So you don't use pregnant women as a model for, and so in society at any given time, 1% of society is pregnant, 99% are not, and so they studied the 1%, and then because they do become, their hemoglobin goes down naturally to allow for lactation to take place.
Okay.
You can't have breastfeeding if you have a lot of iron. Mother Nature knows that. And so because that happened, they deemed it a problem.
Okay.
And then they inoculated the other 99% with fortification and supplements.
Right.
So I think at the very base level is a misunderstanding about the research and the model that was used and how it got interpreted.
Right.
Then I think that the next notch up is, and I was just listening to a pundit talking about John D. Rockefeller and the Flexner Report.
Yep.
He said it was 1909. I think it was 1912.
12 or 13, somewhere in there, I think.
Yeah. And he referred to Flexner as an attorney. No, he was a doctor. They were both brothers were doctors. But in any event, I was fact checking as he was talking. But I won't tell you who it was. I'll let you
Tell me
about
afterwards.
it. Yeah. And so that's when things changed, was in that early 1900 time frame. And I didn't know this, but John D. Rockefeller was a very significant funder of Johns Hopkins Hospital.
That's where they started public health.
Yeah.
They gave some sort of grant or endowment to start public health at Johns Hopkins, and public health
Right.
Public health would never have been allowed because it's not part of the Constitution. There's no reason to do that other than I think they used it to get the NIH, all that stuff set up.
That's brilliant. I'm with you, but I never knew that. I grew up in Baltimore, but like, why would I know that? And so, what this pundit was saying is that greed began to take over, because it was very apparent that there was a profit motive behind that move by the Rockefellers. Even back then, they knew something was going on, and his assertion was the doctors looked the other way, knowing that there was going to be more business as a result. And so you've got misunderstanding, you've got greed, and then if you want to get really crass about it and scare everybody, oh, it's evil trying to take over. It's like, I don't go there. It's not worth it, because we can mine a lot of information just by, well, maybe they misunderstood, and let's stay there, and we can touch on.
Plus, you get less pushback.
You get less pushback, and even to go with greed is uncomfortable, because people don't want to think that doctors, they're really good people. They work hard. No,
and here's the other argument, right? Because I am a October baby, so I am a Libra. So if I was not a doctor, I could have very easily been an attorney, and I can argue both sides very easily. And people are like, what? I'm like, yeah, it's not hard to see both sides of viewpoints. So the Rockefellers start this thing, and the obviously the popular criticism is they just want to make a bunch of money off of oil. Well,
right.
But it could also be, hey, we see that there's a lot of sick people. We think medication could be beneficial to help some people who are having problems. I mean, at the end of the day, there were plagues, there were sicknesses, there were problems that it's very possible. And again, I'm not like cheering for them, but I'm playing that advocate of, what if it wasn't just profits? What if they were actually trying to solve a problem, and along the line they did make some money, and then like lots of things, Morley, the greed starts overtaking it. Next thing you know, you have pharmaceutical giants, etc.
And it may not even be greed. It may just be the desire for power. I think it's a primal quest that a lot of people have, power and control that rules a lot of things. And I think it gets translated into what might be called greed. I think it's more primal. I think it's this need for control, and to shape society. And so
they also had a lot of money that they were trying to shield from taxes and government. Because at the end of the day, the Rockefellers were business people. So
no kidding, right?
Remember, they were also paying taxes that they didn't like to pay.
That's right.
So how do you shield it? You shield it through philanthropy.
Yeah.
Give money out.
And so they had this bolus of money. I'm sure that they did a lot for Columbia University in New York, but they developed the Rockefeller Institute. I'm sure they had a heavy hand, not just in Hopkins. I'm sure there's a whole network of institutions that benefited from that. And it's like, okay, it just helps to have that perspective of where it all got started. And what I'm seeing now in the videos, there's a real theme now about taking on big pharma, the big bad wolf. And a lot of people are criticizing the big pharma bad guys. And I think it's diverting people away from options. I think people are being channeled to 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 direct their energy there. Oh, that big pharma, we got to do something about that big pharma. My whole approach, and maybe to some extent your approach, is I want to make big pharma irrelevant. It's like, who cares about big pharma?
You,
We have this natural ability to heal ourselves. Let's tap into that.
there is this wish slash movement to essentially people want pharma to collapse. You're not going to first of all, you're not going to first of all, if you collapsed pharma, everyone can kiss the economy goodbye, because
No kidding.
the entire economy is based off of oil, based off of pharmaceuticals, I mean, I don't think people realize everyone would be broke tomorrow if they shut pharma down. Plus, on top of that, there is a time and place for pharmaceutical. I mean, there's a lot of surgeries that happen out there. There's a lot of life-saving things that occur out there. Do people want their family members just like to die in the streets? Because you're going to need pharma. You need pharma in life. It has gotten out of control, and we need other solutions to be brought up to speed. But yeah, you're not going to, nor should you, just take down the system.
No, I agree.
You know that you worked in administrations. My father-in-law worked in one of the largest hospitals in the United States. My father-in-law is not like you in studying this, but my father-in-law is a natural health advocate to the max. I mean, his daughter's a chiropractor. His other daughter's a naturopath. Like he has supplements all over his house. If you ask my father-in-law about taking pharma down, my father-in-law would say, that's the dumbest thing you could ever do. First of all, you would never do that. Second of all, we actually need pharma. We need medicine.
Right. Absolutely agree. And I'm not here, and I don't think you are either, but we're not here to defend big pharma.
No.
But we recognize that it plays a role, and that over time the power can shift.
Sure.
But I think what people need to understand is that there is a very viable alternative, and that the body does know how to heal itself. It's got to have the right nutrients. And if you keep within the domain of convention, taking the supplements of convention, you're never going to tap into that natural powerhouse of recovery. And that's really what the root cause protocol does, is say, let's push all that convention aside because it's not helping our energy production, it's not helping our immune system, it's not helping our recycling system. And let's focus on what we know from the literature. We're not making this stuff up. What we know from the literature is going to reinvigorate the process of recovery. I think it's time for more people to know that those options, in fact, exist. That's all. And it's like, we don't need to get into the, big bad wolf. Let's get people excited about what they can do for themselves. And you know what? It goes back to the expression, don't worry about man. Excuse me. Don't worry about mankind. Worry about man. Take care of yourself. Mankind will take care of itself. Don't worry about it. Big pharma will be dealt with at some point. We don't need to worry about that. It's like, take all that mental energy and just put it aside and focus on your own recovery. I think that's really the message.
I don't disagree.
Yeah. But what I'm seeing is this growing crescendo, just as you've noted, let's take down big pharma. It's like, that's a really slippery slope.
Well, I've learned, we talk about this behind the scenes all the time. I grew up in a black and white world, and I became black and white on many issues. And then guess what I learned, Morley? It's not a black and white world. It is this world is literally all shades of gray.
Absolutely.
You need pharma, you need supplements, you need major medical, you need natural health, you need all of this across. You need politicians, you need business people. There is no set
Yeah.
this way.
Yeah. No, absolutely true. And we need to have a balanced perspective of what's
Right.
going on. And I think there's this um, drive in society now to polarize,
Of
right?
course.
And keep people pitted at each other. And I would argue that that comes from more and more iron, because how does a magnet work? It gets polarized,
Sure.
right? There's a north and south pole. And as we have more iron in our body, we're going to be more polarized in our thinking, and that's not healthy. And so we need to get back to a much more balanced regulation of the minerals and the metals. And
Sure.
people
I
just don't realize how important they are.
I somebody told me recently, we need to get rid of all pain meds. And I go, no, you don't.
What?
That's a bad idea. Like, oh, they're horrible. Um, well, if you would like to have surgeries and people, people who are passing away, who are in pain, like you can't get rid of pain meds. You have to have now. Are they completely out of control? 100% out of control. But
Right.
guess what? People have dental issues. People have this. People have that. You need pain meds. Are you going to get rid of antibiotics? No. Sometimes, sometimes people have something that's out of control, and you're going to have to get it under control, and you'll work on the gut after you get it under control. But again, where we become a black and white society.
Yeah. No, we swing from one end to the other. And anecdotal, an anecdotal case study, individual who had not tried Recuperate. I said, why don't you try it? And 5 days after she started it, she said, is it possible that the pain that I've had for 30 years could disappear in 5 days? I said, well, anything's possible. I think they teach that in chiropractic school.
Anything's possible. The body has an amazing ability to heal.
But what people don't realize is that the pain receptors are regulated by copper. Most people don't know that. Most practitioners don't know that.
No.
And so picture, how old are you, dude? You're what, 40 something?
25.
Yeah, right.
I will be 47 next month.
Okay, picture being out of sorts for 30 years. That's a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And then have it go away in less than a week. I mean, literally, the pain's gone.
Sure.
And so it's just, I think it's important for people to keep an open mind about what the possibilities are. That does the body have a natural ability to regulate itself, to recycle itself, to revitalize itself, to reinvigorate it? I think it does. And I'm not naive, not being Pollyannish. I just think we're in an era where there's this age of disbelief and this era of dependence on the experts. And I don't think the experts understand how the body really works. I really don't. I think it's been drummed out of the training of most practitioners. The formal training just doesn't embrace what's really going on inside the body. I don't think.
What is your personal favorite food that is copper rich that you like to eat?
Ooh. Well, historically, prior to 1987, prior to glyphosate, I love beef liver. Absolutely love it.
Do you really?
Yeah, I do. I always have. And so Tony is the driver for the car place that we go to. It's just a really salt of the earth guy, and he has such a good way about him. And so we were. I was schooling him up. He's in his 70s, and I was schooling him up on. He was complaining about this and that, and I said, "Well, you know what? Iron's building your body."
You're better off getting through him than you are a doctor.
No kidding, right? And so he was fascinating. He said, well, how can I get rid of this iron? I said, well, two things you can do right away. So you can donate blood. He goes, okay. He said, I can do that. I'm happy to do that. I said, you got to go find copper-rich foods. And he said, well, like what? I said, well, beef liver. He goes, oh my God, he said, every week we go out to Oxford, North Carolina, and we go to George's restaurant to get their beef liver. And I'm like, George's, that's where we're going this weekend. So I'm going to check out a new restaurant for beef liver.
Ooh,
But
nice.
the challenge is we live in an era where how much minerals are in the soil. What's
Correct. Back to that soil, right?
back to the soil. So there were many foods as a Ute that I used to love to
A
eat.
Ute.
But Ute, but I don't know what they are. You you can't rely on the nutrient tables anymore because those were all pre-glyphosate. There's no post-glyphosate mineral table or nutrient table. They don't exist. Oh, there's all sorts of eye candy on the internet, but it's all based on
Eye
old
candy.
research. But it's not valid.
Right.
The numbers are no longer valid. And so I think that's the challenge is that there are foods that I've loved historically. Oysters. Oh my God, I love oysters. Do they really have the minerals that they're supposed to have? I don't know. I don't
And
I don't have
what's
a
not farm raised and fed crap and
right. Do you have a little Geiger counter you use to measure your oysters before you eat them? Like,
well, I do.
yeah, you are such a gearhead. Oh my God, that's funny. No, but I think that's the challenge: is nuts, seeds. The organ meats historically have been great vessels of copper. I don't know that
Hmm.
that's true anymore. And what when you were making the comment about aluminum replacing copper
Yeah.
in these different devices, think about what they're spraying in the skies,
Oh,
right? What's in the spray?
tons of
Aluminum.
stuff. Barium, mercury, probably iron,
Aluminum.
aluminum. That's right.
Aluminum. And so, when what are we learning? Well, the aluminum breaks down. So it's just we live in a crazy world, right?
A mess.
Well, you know, it, it is what it is, and
Sure.
all we can do is make the most out of what we've got. And I this has been a very challenging week because I've dealt with broken printers for most of it. I've spent 6 hours with Hewlett Packard technicians. That's a lot of hours. I told one today. I said, "Do
You
you know how
couldn't
much I
figure it
charge?"
out that much time?
Yeah, no. I had one technician take 3 hours, and
Oh
finally
God.
he said, "I think your printer's broken." I said, "I told you that 3 hours ago." So, but
Think your printer's broken. I told you that 3 hours ago.
I'm like, it's like it doesn't take a rocket scientist. After I've been working with HP printers for 15 years. Like, oh my God, don't get me started.
It's kind of like
Cars, cars and
it's
printers.
kind of like there's algae in the system because we used to have
Yeah,
copper.
right, right.
Maybe you should put copper back.
Maybe I should analyze. Is there any copper in this printer? There probably isn't any.
God no, a little bit of silver.
Maybe a little bit of silver. Oh my God.
I'm an egg junkie. Any copper in eggs?
Retinol is
Retinol, yeah.
retinol is a good
Choline,
thing,
love my choline.
and choline, of course. And there's some really important ovolactoferrin that chelates iron out.
Okay,
Ovolactoferrin. A lot of amazing protein. It's the perfect protein,
the egg
perfect
is.
source. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Um, Again, what's the chicken eating? Is the chicken pecking at grass and eating bugs, or is the chicken being fed organic soy and corn?
there's a
Well,
good question. How much copper? Before
mm,
we go, how much copper is in, let's say, grass and bugs?
no, it's a really important question. The There's vitamin C and beta carotene in grass.
Okay.
So what's natural vitamin C? It has an enzyme, tyrosinase, at the core.
That's right. Everyone's taking
Right?
everyone's taking a tyrosinase supplement today.
Right? And so when the ruminant eats the grass, it breaks down that vitamin A, gets the goodies out of that, the bioflavonoids and all the other good stuff, and the copper, and it's turning the beta carotene into retinol, and the retinol is what enables the copper loading mechanisms in the body to load up copper into the engines that regulate our body. It's absolutely fascinating, and nobody knows this though. It's not part of um, the culture of this society. Does not understand what is bioavailable copper. That's eating grass. That's why grass fed is so important and grass finished. But again, the kicker now is, are the microbes in the soil, and are the minerals there to feed the microbes in the soil? That's the catch.
You need a study on copper in the animal and insect world.
Yeah. Well, any arachnoid, eight-legged critter, is a blue blood.
Ooh.
Spiders are blue bloods. Crabs, blue bloods.
Interesting.
Yeah. Lobster, blue bloods.
That's
But
I didn't think about that.
but what has changed in the seabed? I don't have any awareness of what the mineral composition is of the sea now. I mean, I know, having grown up in Baltimore, the Chesapeake Bay has changed a lot in my lifetime. I don't know what it's like now. I know it's different.
They are they are now Bill Gates has invested
Bill
in a
Gates
company.
is a franchise. He's a
What's that?
franchise, but go ahead.
What's that?
Yeah. He's a franchise. I don't know that the person is there, but the franchise is there.
Sure. So Bill Gates has invested in a company called Ruminate.
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 Ooh, wow.
It's over in, I want to say, New Zealand, which kind of scary because they used to be clean.
Yeah, I'm getting nervous right now.
So they're using a feed that they created out of red seaweed, and they're making it carrageenan, and they're feeding it to the cows to lower methane.
No, that's not. Well, that might be okay. The methane, the enzyme to break down methane requires copper, and so but carrageenan makes me nervous.
I know. Well, they're using the red seaweed. They're using public relations to say, "Hey, we're using red seaweed." So because we're saying what's in the water, right? So red seaweed, right. But from the red, they're not just doing red seaweed. They're obviously extracting from the red seaweed the carrageenan, right, which is what they're putting in the feed. I just learned this last week. I've been reading up on it.
You know, when you stop and think about, there are a lot of people to feed on this planet. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty sobering thought.
The soil has to be turned fast, and we need to put lots of animals on it.
That's right. Yeah.
We need our bison back. We need our buffalo. We need, I mean, it's right. You pretty much have, where there aren't people, you better having stuff roam.
You better have what?
Like animals roaming.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. That's right.
Build all the deserts back up. I mean, it's really the only way. I mean, they've already proven they can do it. I mean, it's already been done. It's just a matter of scaling it.
Yeah, that's exactly.
You could probably turn the soil back over really fast if you scaled the animal. If you scale the animal roaming up again, and then ranches and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's what Gabe Brown's book is all about. How quickly he was able to do that. Absolutely. And there are other farmers, obviously.
100%.
He's got a lot of notoriety.
Well, sir.
Amazing.
Good conversation.
Do we get to the finish line?
We got across the finish line. Very good stuff. Very interesting conversation. Some good meat, red meat in there. I like that.
Yeah, right.
There's some good beef liver in there.
And some good organ meat, right? Not
That's
just red meat,
fantastic.
but organ meat.
I appreciate you, sir.
Well, likewise, I
We'll talk
appreciate
more
the
about this
opportunity to
next
have
week
this
as well.
conversation. I look forward to it. Okay.
For everybody, this is Morley Robbins, Root Cause Protocol, rcp123.org, or the rootcauseprotocol.com. I'm Dr. Jason Dean. It's been Mondays with Morley. Everybody have a great rest of your Monday night, actually. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Health, freedom, knowledge. This